I give you back again, Ramin Bahrani. And this is another of our first of the week of this festival. We have our first male young actor, Noah Lomax. And Noah, Ramin has been here 3 other times before, so he already has a golden thumb, but this is your first golden thumb. Thank you. And I have a feeling, as you go along, you will maybe one day win an Academy Award, but you will always know you got the golden thumb first. Okay. We'll take care of it. And now, you two. We are also going to have tonight the variety film critic Scott Foundas, and from RogerEbert.com, Brian Tallerico, and they're going to conduct the Q&A. I think we should sit in the center.
Well, Ramin, let me just start by asking you, I think all of your films have been animated by a very strong social conscience, but the first 3 films were very much about people who are outsiders in this country in one way or another, and in these last 2 films are much more about people who ostensibly should be living the American dream, but are somehow still kind of on the outside. And I'm wondering if there was sort of a conscious shift for you in terms of the perspective of your storytelling with these last 2 movies.
Yes, I think so. I remember with Chop Shop trying to convince people that it wasn't just kids in a chop shop that were struggling to make money. It was the whole country was going through things like this, but it seemed hard for people to grasp that in 2007. It was just 1 or 2 years later where suddenly the pain became quite apparent. So I thought it was a good opportunity to move into that. I mean, without any price, there was a chance to do, basically to put the banking system into a farm, to completely de-romanticize the farming community. And then here, the structure just seemed too good, that a man gets kicked out of his home, has to work for the man who kicked him out, and it's kind of a deal with the devil to get the home back, but has to kick people out. That structure, which I felt when I went to Florida and I spent a lot of time there, it became apparent that this could have a thriller to it, which I had never had in my other films, anything like that. So I thought that was a good opportunity to get the social thing that I want with the metaphysical thing or the philosophical thing that I want, but to have inherent to it seemed to be a thriller, which could help it in terms of reaching a wider audience that may never see someone being evicted unless it came in that form. So I thought that all added up to something good for the film.
As an artist, how do you balance that message that you're trying to get across with writing characters? Do you find yourself worrying, am I focusing too much on the theme of this and not the people? How do you watch yourself in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants a message film. I mean, like, an agenda film is the one that you lead the stampede to get the hell out of the cinema, because no one wants that. it always came out of the characters, right? What are the characters going to do? Because Andrew's struggle is such a difficult one. We left, but we came back a little bit, and Scott and I were standing in the back in the scene at the dock, and I whispered to you, it's my favorite scene. Yeah. And as the men are talking, Andrew says, is it worth it? And Michael says, as opposed to what? And you went, huh. Yeah, and I leaned to you and said, that's the entire film. Yeah. That one dialogue is the point of the whole thing for me, as to what, that's such a tough situation to be in and such difficult decisions that he has to make.
In a grander scheme, you spoke a little bit about income inequality at the beginning, and at Toronto you spoke about reassessing our current situation. And Roger always encouraged films that started conversations. We can name so many, but what do you hope the conversation is that this film starts?
I don't want to say too much because I don't want to be the one curating that conversation.
Makes sense.
I'm assuming unless you've been through this, you don't know what that 10 minutes of Andrew and Laura and Noah getting evicted, I'm assuming unless you've been through it, you never knew it was like that. That should be enough to get something cooking.
Well, I'd like to ask Noah a little bit just about sort of how you came into the picture, and to talk a little bit about Ramin as a director. What did you enjoy about working with him?
Well, Ramin gave me lots of freedom to do what I wanted to do with the character, and he treated me like a professional actor and not like a kid. And when I asked him what I think I should do in this scene, he would say, "Go. What do you think your character would do?" And so he gave me lots of freedom, and I really liked that.
He was Noah's so good as an actor, and I remember I saw his tape. I said, well, I would love to see him. And so he came from Atlanta to New Orleans, which is where we shot the film, although he had family there. And I think you had a scene already in your hand, or no, when you first came? I always try to hide the scenes, but usually they get their hands somehow on a scene. And I always stray wildly in the first reading. I like to read with the actor. And I always stray wildly off book because very quickly you can start to separate who you're never going to think about. Because once you go off book, if the other person stays on book, no matter how ridiculous their answer is, like, hi, how are you? And you say, I'm fine. And I say, well, what are you having for dinner? And you say, I'm going to have a pizza. And then I'm going to say, well, do you enjoy your mom? And then you're like, with anchovies? And you realize they're not listening. Yeah. And you know that this person can never be in your film. And Noah was so good at the improvisations. Yeah. He had so many ideas, and he was so quick with those. And then if I asked him to try it in a completely different way, without missing a beat, he would do it in a completely different way. And when I brought him back to do it again, he was still good. Like, he was consistently good. And a few times he would come to me and he would say, I'm unsure about this, and I would, well, just change it, you know.
I'm always curious how father-son chemistry develops. Did you get to spend time with Andrew? Did you get to just hang out and play video games and do things like that?
Well, Andrew really felt like an older brother to me, and we hung out a lot. We went to the zoo. We hung out in between scenes, and he really felt like an older brother to me, and so did Laura. She felt like a mom, and she was just really nice, and it was just, we really did feel like family, and it was just great to work with such great actors.
Yeah, you always have to make room for that in prep. More important than rehearsing is just that they spend time together. Like even Michael and his 3 daughters, the rehearsal was just, they went out twice, you know? So, very much, yeah.
Well, I guess the other thing that kind of sets these last 2 films apart from your other work is that you've been working mostly with professional actors on these last 2 films, and your earlier films had a lot of non-professional actors. How has that changed your your process, or has it changed your process in any significant way?
I mean, it's certainly different. There's less for me to do in some ways. With the non-professional actors, well, like any professional and non-professional, casting is the most important thing you're ever going to do in terms of getting a performance. It's just, you just got to cast it well. But with the non-professionals, depending on what role they have, if it's a significant role, I mean, I'm putting them through my own idea of what I think it should be in acting school, and there's a lot of rehearsal, and there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. With the professional actors, they don't need all of that. They already have a sense of how to do it. And with the non-professionals, I'm improving the script during the rehearsal with them, based on them. With the professionals, if they're engaged with me in the script, Andrew was quite engaged, we're changing the script in advance. Otherwise, they may be changing it on the day or in a conversation the week before. So there's more freedom for me to be focusing on other things. And with Noah, Michael, Laura, Andrew, I mean, especially Michael, it's just like all of them elevate the work to some other place that is I'm unable to understand when I'm writing a script. I mean, when Michael delivers his dialogues, it's just, for me, he's Michael like a slot machine that's been rigged to spit out a lot of coins all the time, you know? It's like you go to Fort Knox and you steal gold, and then you turn around and there's just more gold, and there's more gold. It's like the guy is just like an endless machine of gold, you know?
But how important was it for you that character not be a sort of one-dimensional villain? I mean, I think what makes that character so compelling is that we see the humanity in him, and the wonderful moment at the end when he thanks Andrew's character for what he's done, and you feel like it's not a totally ironic sentiment, because he's just said 2 scenes earlier that he can't go out to dinner without looking behind him, you know, and suddenly you feel like maybe he's actually relieved that this may actually be over in some way.
I don't want to comment on the ending, because I've been here before, I don't like commenting on endings, because I don't want to limit people's interpretation of the end. I'll come back to how that came to be, because it's pretty interesting, but yeah, very important. Like, even in the beginning, I feel in Michael's performance, you can see, despite the nasty sarcasm of his dialogue about the suicide, I think in his performance, you feel the pain he's in. That, of course, gets articulated in his kind of speech to Andrew about, you know, what he thinks about the country and what it means, because, yeah, my dad was a roofer. I mean, that whole thing, you start to realize that he's just not going to be that guy. He's not going to drown, whatever that takes, you know, because he's seen his dad did honest hard work his whole life, and he got burned for it, which I think we all can appreciate that. So he's just not going to allow that, and I think that and the moments you mentioned are enough to know that underneath that there was some other person that has become this way, because ultimately the heavy is always the system. It's not like Michael born to be a bad person. The system creates this situation. And we all know it. The system is creating Andrew's situation. His last thing was there was nothing in the script. In the script, it just said that Andrew and Michael look at each other in the very end of the film. And I was like, Michael, I think they should say something. You know, what's going to happen? I mean, I guess it could just be a beautiful look between you two, and we would wonder about the mystery of it, but I wish that you would say something. And he's like, we'll figure it out on the day. He mumble. I love Michael to death. We hang out, I go listen to, he's in a rock band. I go hear his rock band.
He's playing the Smiths in Evanston. He's doing all of The Queen is Dead in a Smiths tribute band.
Is that true?
That's true.
Oh.
In June. I think it's sold out already.
His
though.
band, The Corporal. We're going to be in Bolivia together shooting something. No, I'm not shooting it. I'm helping a friend in May. But he refused. I would text him no on the day. So it comes to the day, and we're shooting it. And I'm shooting, most scenes I shoot in one long shot. I don't like to cut things up. And then I'll do another setup, and I'll shoot the whole thing, and in editing. And I ended up being over there, and he was over here, and he tried something, it didn't work. I said, then he he got very angry with Andrew's character, and I said, well, Michael, you're turning yourself in if you act so guilty. He said, that's true. Then he tried something. I said, no, but it's getting closer. Can you keep going in that direction? I don't know what that was, but keep going. And then he did this thank you. And I was over there, and he was over there, and he turned, and he looked at me like this. And he said, what did you think? I said, well, Michael, you're smiling like a child. Of course it was good. Just do a few more takes. I need a couple more shots, you know? And I never, to this day, I never actually asked him what he meant. And I refused to ask him, and I asked him, actually I forbid him, but politely I asked him, but I forbid him, to ever tell anyone in an interview what he meant by that. And I don't want to know what he meant. I prefer not to know. I think people want to know everything. What's the answer to that? You pull out the phone, Google it. I don't want to know. There was an era where we didn't know, and that allowed for dreams and imagination, and I don't want to know.
Noah, who do you admire? Who do you follow? What actors do you like and want to be like and got you into this industry? 2 microphones if you want them.
I really like Christian Bale, but I only really like him because he was Batman.
It's a good enough reason.
Yeah.
Good enough reason.
I guess I don't really pay attention to like all the actors. I just like them for their character, I guess. But yeah.
I'm interested, Ramin, if you see this film and at any price as sort of being in this tradition of sort of the American social melodrama. What we might think of some work by Arthur Miller, who we were talking about earlier tonight, although I also thought about films by Elia Kazan, by Jules Dassin, something like Thieves Highway. And it's a kind of movie that you don't really see that much today, that's really dealing with, I mean, I was just trying to think just now as we were standing in the back, what was the last movie I saw where you just had a sense of what it actually means for somebody to own their own home and how important that is? A major thing in most people's life, hardly ever dealt with in this artistic medium. And I really was at a loss to think of when that was.
A good reason why I wanted to make it. I mean, we've been talking, you know, at dinner about this type of subject of have we seen it before, what could it be? And to me, it was just amazing that no one was doing it, you know. Some part of you, I have this conversation with my friend who's a novelist, Arvind Adika. He wrote The White Tiger, won the Man Booker Prize. We've been friends since college, and we all talk on the phone about, I don't know, 3 times a week, something like that. He's in India. And sometimes the two of us always say, well, if we're not great artists, at least there's something in it that maybe would have been worth it, you know, if you know what I mean. No, there's not much of that anyway. I mean, there is some shadow of Oliver Stone, who was here last year, and I told him at the dinner last year, I said, I'm so sorry, but I took some things from, you know, Wall Street. He said, he still wanted to look at it. I have to show it to him, which I think quite an interesting. He was, by the way, talk about a guy for a decade who was making, on a big scale, very socially and politically minded films. I mean, it's bizarre that he got them done. On
and about America, Americana.
And a very
history.
big, on a huge scale.
Yeah.
I think if he was trying to do that today, he could do it, the scale would drop, right?
Oh, yeah.
It would be an independent film, it wouldn't be a studio film.
Well, I was going to ask, a film like this that's played so many festivals, you took it to Toronto and Telluride and Sundance, can you speak about how that's important for a movie like this, the festival experience, and this festival in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being very important because thank God the reception was very positive. Out of Telluride and Toronto, there was talk that the actors of the film could be upending the Oscar race, things like that. And that ended up creating a lot of heat, so we ended up having quite a good sale for the film. For me, it was a very big sale, and the distributor willing to put, I mean, it's not a studio movie, but they're willing to put some money to try to get the thing out into an audience to see it, a wider audience, which is very hard for independent films. I mean, Michael Barker's here. They get to do it with amazing films at Sony, classics. It's just hard to do. because whatever my distributor is going to push the way Michael pushes, and in the end of the day, the studio is putting $100 million into marketing a film. So this ended up helping a lot, the festival, in a big way.
And I was wondering if you could talk about a name some people may have seen in the credits, one of your collaborators on the screenplay, Amir Naderi, who's a sort of legendary figure of the Iranian New Wave, whose films should be much better known than they are, and how you've come to collaborate with him.
Yeah, Amir Naderi is a great Iranian filmmaker, but also American filmmaker and Japanese filmmaker.
Yes, most recently.
His last film was in Japan. He's trying to shoot something in Italy now. He made one of his most famous films that maybe someone here has seen is called The Runner. He wrote Kiarostami's first couple of films. And then a New York filmmaker for a long time. And when I was a student, I was an undergraduate student at Columbia, I tried to meet him, he refused. Then I left, I came back, I tried to meet him, no, didn't want to talk. And the cameraman from Man Push Cart, Chop Shop, and Goodbye Solo had shot movies for him twice. That's why I hired him. I said, he must have learned from Amir, he must be good. And I remember I was shooting Man Push Cart day 2 or 3 of Man Push Cart 2004. Driving to the set with the cameraman, I turned to him and said, my God, we've just shot 2 days with no coverage. Meaning we're shooting the scenes in one shot and there's no other setup or shot to cut them together. So if the thing isn't good in the edit room, I knew I would be in a mess. Meaning this was quite risky, and it was my first film, and I hadn't even thought that I was going to do it that way. It just kind of started happening that way. And I was really terrified that morning that we should start changing how we're making the film. And we're setting up the 3rd day of shooting. I hadn't gotten a shot off yet, but I'm very nervous. I'm thinking I should start adding shots. And Michael hands me the phone, and he says, "Is Amir Naderi on the phone? The guy been avoiding me forever." And he said, "I heard you're making a movie." I said, "Yes." And then he shouted into the phone, "Risk, risk, risk," and he hung up. So I shot the whole movie with no coverage. And Chop Shop was made that way too, with no coverage.
Good advice.
The first take of this film was done with no coverage. Oh. It's amazing how professional crews and actors freak out when you don't do coverage. The non-actors in my non-professional crews thought it was normal. In fact, I bothered Michael because I said, "Well, you're not going to get it." I said, "Michael, I have non-actors would do 2-3-minute scenes. Maybe I'll go get them, you know?" So then Amir became interested in looking at the edit of Man Push Cart, and he basically said, "You've been through the fire now. Now we can start talking." So we started talking here and there, and then we became closer later. And then I started talking to him about 99 Homes. And then little by little, we started working together, and then we started working on it. And we're working on something new now. Also, this was with my co-writer from Chop Shop and Goodbye Solo. Now the 3 of us work together. And he's like a big brother now for me. And I learned so much from him about life, You have to know, Amir Naderi, as a kid in the south of Iran, let's say 65 years ago, didn't even have a home. He was on the street as a beggar selling cotton candy like this and popsicles, and in this hand, he'd be trying to read Dostoevsky. And he wouldn't pay attention to selling, and the popsicle would melt. And now, you know, he won in Cannes, he won in Venice, he had retrospective in Lincoln Center. But he started from there and came. So the amount of things I can learn from this gentleman, other than his knowledge of literature and cinema, which is probably one of the few people could give you a run for your money in cinema history is him. But he came from a place that is somehow another era, another time. So I learned so much from him.
There's another name in the credits, of course. You don't often see films dedicated to film critics, so why dedicated to Roger? I know you spoke a little bit about that in the intro, but if you want to go into any more detail or not.
For all the reasons I said in the beginning, and also, Chaz, as you know, I came to see Roger in the hospital on Christmas Day Well, there was something, I'm not really on social media, but there was someone called me because Roger sent a tweet that alarmed everybody. And so I got very nervous and we started emailing about it. And then I asked if it would disturb you if I came, and you said no, so I just bought a ticket. And for whatever reason, the timing equaled Christmas Day. It wasn't like I planned to come that day, it was just somehow it worked. And I was able to tell him the synopsis. Oh. Yeah. And he gave it a thumbs up, the synopsis, the one sentence. And I really wanted him to see it. I've always felt that his belief in me was more than I believe in myself. And I always feel that with each film I make, I think, would Roger be proud of it? Would it get me one step closer to the things he said about me? You know, so I thought it should be for him.
I think we'll open it up to some questions from the audience, and we have, as always, some microphones floating around, so just wait for the microphone to come to you. But we have some questions out there.
Oh, I should say, before you leave, on September 25th, the movie's going to open, and I'm changing maybe 2 minutes of it. So,
I don't know if we wanted to
So
reveal
see
that.
it again.
very good reason
The first time.
See it
very
again.
good reason to see it again.
All right,
It's some very big secret is going to be new in the film. You're never going to believe it.
It's a special
It's
cameo.
unbelievable.
It turns
What
out
gonna-
that Michael Shannon is a woman.
Shh,
as-
hey, come on, don't tell him. I got to pay to.
we got a question right to your right over here.
Question over here.
Ramin, 2 years ago at the festival, I asked you a question about your new visual style, and you, in response, you said you would bring 99 homes. So thank you very much for keeping your promise. What can we expect in another 2 years?
Where's Michael? I feel like I want to talk to you. Okay. I was telling Michael over a glass of wine just now, I'm sitting on something that never been done before. I have some character that doesn't exist in the history of literature or cinema. Because of the time we're living in, that character could exist right now. So I'm searching for a structure that would honor that thing, that person, that character. So even I don't know. But I feel like a massive weight because it just didn't exist before, you know? So I'm searching for the structure that would do it right. That, I assume, then means the visual style would have to make sense for that, too. So I'm wondering, too.
In the balcony, in the center.
Hi, first of all, thank you for making this film. It's obviously a really important film that speaks to really critical problems. I'm wondering what kind of research you had to do for it, and if any part of it is based on real stories that you have found in your research or in the media. Thank you.
Yeah, easily you can say it's inspired by true events. The whole thing is real. I did a lot of research, starting with just reading books, reading an endless amount of articles, and then, the foreclosure crisis hit 4 states more than any others, California, Nevada, Arizona, and Florida. So I had to pick one of these states. I picked Florida because of Disney World and golf and retiree. It just seemed cleaner than the other states somehow. Like Nevada, it's already corrupt, one of them. Lots of gambling and prostitution. The other one, California, has got porn or whatever. I don't know, Florida seemed cleaner, and I loved Orlando because of Disney World. And so I started going to Florida a lot and did a lot of research there. I spent a lot of time in West Palm Beach with Lynn Simoniak, who's a fraud attorney that the banks tried to foreclose on her home, which was a big, big mistake because she uncovered robo-signing. She's profiled on 60 Minutes and 100 other news coverage and led a lawsuit against the banks for almost $100 million and won. So she was a huge help. And we would go to foreclosure court together, which is also called the rocket dockets. They're called the rocket dockets because in 60 seconds they'll determine your fate, which is the scene you see with Andrew and Noah in the beginning of the film. God knows how many days I went there. And the weird thing was, those things are really horrors. Like, if you show up and you don't speak English, you're Hispanic, let's say, and you've brought a translator, very easily the judge will say, I have no time for this thing to be translated. If you don't speak English, that's your problem. Keep moving forward. And they just move forward and just bulldoze over things. And I showed up with Lynn, and the judges all know her, and they know her in ways that they don't like her, right? And whenever I go places, I go with the yellow legal pad to write notes. And little by little, people started winning. And Lynn leaned over to me and said, the judge thinks you're a reporter for the New York Times, and he doesn't want to look bad. So as long as you sit here, people are going to win. And I was like, this is great. Okay, 2 hours later, I'm like, we got to go to the next appointment. But I couldn't leave, you know? I'm sitting there, I'm stuck in the foreclosure court, because if I stay, they would. So anyway, a lot of time in foreclosure court, a lot of time in Fort Myers with a real estate broker, who calls even his own 2 kids Miguel's. I love the guy, though. Such an amazing guy. While I was in Fort Myers, I happened to visit Tampa. I went to Scott Foundas's original news rag, where I heard about, I think you were like 15, like the youngest person ever to write criticism for the newspaper. You were a legend still there. I went to motels on Highway 142, which are on the way to Disney, and I lived in them for a little bit. So you'll have the hotels and motels end up getting sectioned off. Dealers and prostitution, construction, day labor, migrant workers, and then the middle-class families, as you see in the film, who are in this situation, school buses. These are all things that are for real. And then hustles. I mean, endless. I'm sorry about your state. Endless corruption. I never witnessed. Everywhere I went was just mind-boggling corruption, and everyone had a gun. And that's where I realized. And there was so much corruption in the housing industry from Washington all the way to Rick Carver's job. That's how I realized, and the violence of it, that people were committing suicide, people were shooting guns. You just go home tonight or YouTube, you'll see this stuff. I've been on many evictions. I've gotten videos that have been filmed of a lot of evictions, including the elderly man. That's based on a real eviction. So all of that stuff was real. I mean, part of creativity is just taking real things and putting them in an order that makes sense. Even Andrew lived in the motel. Michael visited the real estate broker. Andrew met construction workers who had done evictions and had done exactly what his character's doing. The motels were so weird. Even Sean Baker, who made that iPhone movie, the Tangerine.
Tangerine.
He called me a month ago and said, Ramin, I'm in Florida. I'm researching a new film, and every motel I go to, they all know you. And I haven't seen 99 Homes yet. I just want to make sure I'm not making the same film. So all that was real. Speaking of non-actors, the sheriff is a real sheriff who really does evictions. The clean-out crew, Jeff was an actor. All the other clean-out crew are real clean-out crew guys. When Andrew's knocking on doors, evicting people, half of them are actors, half of them are real, and they own those homes. So there's, again, a mix of professional and non-professional. And I just wouldn't tell Andrew, actually, who was real. The elderly man actually is an actor, but I wouldn't tell Andrew. And I asked the elderly gentleman, Don, I said, can you please go with me on this? And he's like, no problem. So I just told Andrew that this is a real guy that I've been meeting in my location work, and he has dementia. So I'm actually uncertain what he's going to say. So I need you to, you're giggling now, but Andrew was in a panic, not because he's a panic as an actor, as a human being, he was deeply disturbed.
Well, so is that character in
Yeah.
a panic in that.
Actually, I cut it out of the film, but he does drift into dementia-type things in that scene. I felt it was too much, distracted. But I think Andrew's performance in that scene is unbelievably good. And I think a lot of it is because that other actor is so good, and Andrew felt it was all happening, you know.
Oh,
Anyone
I have a
else?
question on the very back.
Ramin, it's Michael here.
Oh, hey, Michael.
Listen, what I find so amazing about your films, which is one of the reasons I think Roger really loved your films, is you take on genres like a father-son story or a romantic drama like At Any Price or the story here. And always there's a social conscious issue that is in the subtext that is there in addition to this kind of Hollywood genre. What other social issues are you interested in exploring in the future?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, things that I've been hovering around in New York. I'm not saying I'm working on this subject now, but I have been spending more time post Ferguson and Garner. I've been spending a lot more time in protest movements with protest leaders, with African American leaders of protest movements. I'm quite interested in that. Prison reform I'm interested in, the idea of prison. The idea that if we've put on this screen child soldiers from a South American or an African country, everyone in this audience would go, oh my God, victims, it's so sad, and if I put the same images of children with guns and said it was Chicago or it was New York, everyone here would say, oh, thugs, look at these disgusting thugs, why don't they clean themselves up? This is the reality, and to me it's a baffling one. I don't know how to approach it. It's on my mind anyway. I still have to deal with this guy that I found because that gentleman is 2 years is expecting a film. But I have that hovering there. But if you have one, tell me, and you can finance it and distribute it, by the way, Michael. Let's make a deal right now, right here.
Down front to your left?
No, give Michael the microphone. You think I'm kidding? We have witnesses.
It's on video. We have video.
Michael, if I make such a film, will you finance and distribute it? Say it louder.
He said absolutely.
He said for the record. Michael Barker, I think co-CEO or CEO of Sony Pictures Classics right here on the record said absolutely, and I get final cut. Listen, the #1 rule of improvisational actors is yes and. So yes and I get final cut.
To your left.
And first class tickets, no.
I don't mean to interrupt the business deal, sorry. I had a question for Noah. Since you're a Batman fan, what was it like working with both Spider-Man and General Zod in the same film?
Well, it was pretty cool when I first got the audition and I found out that Spider-Man could possibly play my dad. I was pretty excited, and when I found out I got it, I was ecstatic. And then I met him because we were doing a fitting for wardrobe, and I saw him there because he was also doing a fitting. And I just met him casually. I wasn't like, hey, can I get a picture and stuff. But I just think of them as any other actors. I don't treat them like, I don't go up to them every other second and say, hey, can I get a picture? They're my friends, so.
But I did see Andrew asking to get a picture with him.
From the balcony in the center.
Forgive me for not knowing the cinema terms, but I wanted to ask you about the setting. And I noticed that in some of the scenes, especially in the richer houses, the sun was coming through the light in a lot of different places. And then you had the thing at the end when he was talking about the sun. And I wanted to know if that's a conscious choice that you made, or if there were any other conscious choices in setting that, that you may have made similar to that.
A great cinematographer, Bobby Bukowski. I learned a lot working with him. Great production designer, Alex DiGiorlando, Megan Kasperlik, great costume. I had a very strong creative team. In fact, I for X, Y, and Z reasons, I did not know, there were about 70 people on the crew, and I didn't know any of them. All of them I brought new. I thought it should be time for something new. And Bobby and I talked about shooting, for example, shooting Noah, Andrew, and Laura in their home. We thought those scenes should feel more intimate. They should feel more lived in, and so we went handheld on those, closer to them. The camera kind of loving in that environment. And we knew that when we wanted to bring, for example, Andrew into, and the motel, by the way, the same. Because even though the motel is not a great place to live, and it's small, and their house also was smaller than the mansions, these smaller spaces that are crowded with stuff somehow had more heart in them. And the larger mansions, like where Michael lives, they're large and they're not as crowded and they're spacious and there's a lot of sun. And we would shoot wider on those, and usually, not always, but usually Steadicam for a little bit smoother, more polished and clean feel on those environments. And in general, Bobby and I went through the script scene by scene, and we would say, okay, are we going to shoot this handheld, Steadicam, or a tripod, or studio mode? And for the most part, we stuck to that. Occasionally, on the day, you would improvise, and you'd be like, this is not working, Steadicam, let's flip it to handheld, or vice versa. But usually it worked out. The flares, those are deliberate. I talked I had an idea for this thing about the sun in the end. I don't know, some dialogue that's very personal to me. And I remember talking to Bobby about Pasolini, Oedipus Rex, which has some really amazing shots of the sun and has a very amazing quality to it, of handheld and of sun and of glares. And I mentioned it to Bobby, and then as we were shooting, this kind of just, we found this thing there and it worked. And so you're just kind of flipping up the eyebrow on the, like my hand is here and I go here and it's a really different image because of these lights, And we just do that to bring it in.
All right, we have a question right down front.
Hi, my question is for Noah. It's actually in two parts. I was wondering what it was like for you to watch the film afterwards. You were in some of the scenes and you weren't in others, and what it was like to watch the complete film, and also what it was like to work on a film about such a serious contemporary issue.
Well, I mean, this is my second time seeing the film, so the last time I saw it was in Toronto Film Festival, so it's a while ago, but I really love the film, and it was pretty cool to get to see all the stuff that he did with it after waiting, after we filmed it. And for the second part,
Just don't forget, on September 25th, with your family, you have to go pay tickets to see the new scene. There's a very new scene with you in it you don't even know. September 20th.
I don't really understand what you meant by the second question.
It's a serious film. Are you used to being in something with such a serious subject matter, and how important is that for you? Is that good?
Well, I mean, the past films I've done have been serious, but not as serious as this one. So it wasn't hard, but some of the scenes, like the eviction scene, were pretty rough and hard, but it's just, I'm used to it, so it's what I love to do, and yeah.
The eviction scene, very interesting because the Nash eviction scene, the casting of that house was very important. I love location work, and so we're looking for the house. We found the house. And everyone liked it. We negotiated the deal and we got it, the house. And then I started to wonder about it. I wonder if this is the right house. I went back and looked at it, and then I went and I talked to the cameraman and I said, you know, I'm going to draw you a picture of that house. And I did. And I'm like, what do you see? He said, I see a tree. I said, me too. And then I said, I'm going to draw you, if we asked any child in the world to draw a house, what is it going to look like? Let's say in America, what is it going to look like? And then you draw, and everyone knows, it looks like the Dennis Nash house. I said, we need a house that looks like that even a blind person would see that it's a house. And that means you freak everybody out because the shoot is 2 weeks away, and the key location doesn't exist suddenly. And then we found it, let's say, 5 days before shooting the film, and we negotiated, we got it. This is after like one other one that we liked didn't work. This one ended up being better. And then you have to get the gentleman who owned the house to agree that we're taking all his belongings out, and the designer is going to bring all his own stuff in. Because I knew we were going to then throw it out onto the curb, so it had to be all of our own stuff. Normally you may use, I like his bed frame, I like the chest of drawers, I'm just going to change this painting and add some details. This time the whole house had to go. And that's where DJ Orlando and his team are just so good, because that house looked so good, the way they designed it. And then the actors were able to, Andrew and Laura, because they were the ones that were pulling things out, they put their own things in there. So they had their own personal things that they would request the prop guys or the designer, could you get me a little rabbit figurine, or could you get me this, or Laura had some clothes that she wanted, and they would hide them in their own places so that they had some personal attachment to the house. There's a script, of course, for that, but you're letting it be loose. You have a great cameraman who is blasting lights from outside the house and then is working very closely with the production designer for practical lighting. So they're talking about lampshades, and I want 6 more lamps in this house, and I want 4 more on your truck just in case, and I want 5 more lampshades if I want to change them, so that there are no lights in that house. There is no equipment in the house. I'm in one room with a couple of other technical people, and I'm at 2 monitors, and that's the only room that the actors couldn't go in. And then we're shooting with 2 cameras. And the entire eviction scene that's at the door and inside the house is being shot uninterrupted. The actors have their dialogues, like my toaster oven or whatever the things are, and then they're also adding their own things based on the differences between each take. I don't know, Michael's more aggressive in one, so Andrew gets more aggressive, or the other way around. The sheriff was so good, he was, God knows all the codes that he was saying that were not in the script, but they were all true because he was a sheriff. And he lived in Louisiana, but this guy had looked up the ones in Florida, and he was spouting out the Florida codes. This guy's they're just adding. They're just all of them making the film better. And then the second day, we had to shoot the exterior. So you do one take for the actors to run through the entire scene, and you're just outside with the cameras waiting for them to come out. And then they're coming out and doing the outside. And then you do that, again, uninterrupted. And Noah, who I think is amazing in that scene, I'm not going to go into the details, but talk about professional actor. He had his own, there was something very personal happening in his life at that moment, some tragedy of his own, and he just was delivering. Really unbelievable with his mom, Michelle, was just so professional and just so, I think he found some way to channel that emotion and bring it in to the scene, which to me was a level of maturity that I didn't have, I knew as a child that age. I was just really amazed and grateful that he had some intelligence and mind and courage to do that.
I think we have time for one more.
To your far left.
This is described as a thriller. I don't think of it as a thriller. I think it more of a horror film. If I had power over it, I would say that this and capitalism would be mandatory viewing for the 99%. I just want to thank you for it. The last couple of weeks I've been helping a relative with rental property, so I've seen the hopelessness and powerlessness, and you really have done an excellent job. And I've seen your previous movies. I think that your storytelling and filmmaking skills are several magnitudes increased with this, and please continue. I don't have a question, I just want to make a comment.
I think on that note, thank again Ramin and Noah so
Thank you,
much
guys.
for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you.